Ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully because this is not a truth that appears softly. It arrives with force. There are moments in life when someone leaves your world, creates distance, or acts as if they are gone, clears throat, yet their presence still stays in your mind. Their body may be somewhere else, their words may become silent, and their pride may be hidden behind emotional walls. But deep inside, they are still affected. Something much deeper is happening within them, beyond surface emotions or temporary attraction. This is not a passing feeling or a short-lived interest. It is something far more complex and difficult to ignore. It is the kind of psychological connection that goes beyond logic and reaches the unconscious mind. This is the type of bond that causes a person to return to your memory again and again, even when they believe they have moved on, even when they convince themselves that you no longer matter, and even when they try to bury their emotions through distractions, pride, noise, or new experiences, your presence still remains. You continue to exist in their thoughts, especially during quiet moments, in late-night reflections, and in the spaces between thoughts where no one else can enter. At this point, it is important to understand this through a deeper psychological perspective. As Carl Jung suggested, human beings are not guided only by the conscious mind. The conscious mind is limited, organized, and shaped by society. It is the part of us that says, "I am fine," while another, deeper part quietly disagrees. The conscious mind creates stories to protect itself. It says, "I do not care," or "it meant nothing," or "I have moved on." However, the unconscious mind does not follow these stories. It holds emotional impressions, memories, and psychological marks left by meaningful experiences. When someone has deeply touched another person, they do not remain only a memory. They become an active presence within the psyche. This is why such thoughts appear in dreams. This is why small details are remembered without warning. Clears throat. This is why a name suddenly appears in the mind at the exact moment someone is trying hardest to forget. It is also why emotions can change instantly when a memory is awakened. It is important to understand that this psychological response is not always caused by intense emotional investment. Sometimes it happens because the connection was brief but deeply meaningful. Even a short yet genuine interaction can leave a lasting emotional mark. You may have looked at someone in a way that felt completely real to them. You may have reflected a part of themselves they had never noticed before. When someone sees themselves clearly through another person's eyes, it can leave a lasting effect inside them. Once this happens, they do not easily return to their previous emotional state. The mind becomes divided between denial and desire, between what it accepts and what it refuses to admit. People do not always struggle emotionally because of loss alone. Sometimes the struggle comes from recognition. They see something in another person that awakens something inside themselves, whether it is peace, intensity, or something deeply familiar. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe it was the rare experience of being truly seen, not controlled, understood, not judged, valued, not simply noticed. And once the psyche experiences that kind of depth, it begins comparing everything ordinary against it. That is when the mind starts to feel restless. That is when nights become longer. That is when conversations are replayed over and over in the mind, trying to understand what was meant, why that smile appeared the way it did, why there was silence, why things changed, why there was no resistance, why someone did not stay. The mind becomes like a courtroom where the person is both the witness and the judge. Everything is questioned because what remains behind is not something that can be easily explained. Snorts. It cannot be placed neatly into a box marked finished. It continues breathing. It continues moving. It continues returning. And this is what many people fail to understand. The stronger the resistance, the stronger the fixation becomes. The more someone forces themselves not to think about a person, the more that person fills their inner world. The more distraction is used to erase the memory, the clearer that memory becomes. This is the paradox of the human psyche. What is rejected often grows stronger in the shadows. What is denied does not disappear. It simply goes underground and begins to grow deeper roots. Jung reminded us that what is not brought into consciousness eventually controls us from beneath. So, when someone says they are over you, but their actions suggest something different, trust the actions before the words. Words are often just a mask the ego uses to avoid discomfort or embarrassment. Behavior is where the truth quietly reveals itself. They check, they observe, they remember, they respond. They become unusually quiet when your name is mentioned. They overthink what should have been simple. They feel disturbed by ordinary details because deep inside you have become someone important. There is another layer to this, and it is deeply human. Sometimes people are not only reacting to you, they are reacting to what you awakened inside them. They may not even be able to explain it. They may not realize they have projected onto you their longing for completeness, their desire for closeness, their unresolved emotional pain, their lost innocence, their shadow side, and their unfulfilled needs. In that sense, you become a surface onto which the unconscious mind projects its hidden images. That is why you may feel as though they see you, yet do not truly see you at the same time. They are not only noticing who you are as a person, they are also seeing the possibility you represent. You become a symbol of something they never fully experienced in their own life. And symbols carry incredible power. Symbols do not disappear easily. Symbols return in dreams. Symbols whisper. Symbols remain. Symbols shape the direction of a person's life. This is why they cannot simply move on. They are not dealing with an ordinary person. They are facing an image that has taken root in the deepest layers of the soul. Snorts. Now pay close attention, because this is where the truth becomes both painful and meaningful. The person who seems to be losing their peace over you may not even fully understand the depth of their attachment. During the day, they may deny it, yet during the night, they become overwhelmed by it. They may appear indifferent while secretly burning with curiosity. They may seem calm while quietly falling apart inside. The ego resists being vulnerable. The ego prefers the appearance of strength instead of admitting it has been deeply affected. So they create a performance. Snorts. They say, "I am fine." They keep a steady expression. They control their voice. They act as though they have completely mastered the situation. But the human psyche follows its own natural rhythm. Beneath the surface, an emotional storm continues to exist. They remember your touch. They remember your voice. They remember how your presence changed the atmosphere in a room. They remember how silence felt different when you were there. They remember the version of themselves that appeared in your presence. And that memory becomes difficult to carry because now they are faced with what they lost, snorts, or what they failed to hold on to, or what they never found the courage to claim. Ladies and gentlemen, obsession is often not about possession. It is about feeling incomplete. A person who feels whole within themselves does not become emotionally attached to another person in this way, but a person who discovers a missing part of themselves in someone else begins to revolve around that person like a planet around the sun. They may never admit it openly, but every thought returns to you because something unresolved has connected itself to your image. They search for closure, but what they truly want is relief. They hope for peace, but what they actually desire is freedom from their inner conflict. And inner conflict does not disappear through avoidance or denial. It only ends through honest confrontation. That is why they cannot stop thinking about you. You have become the pressure point of their inner world. You are the question they cannot answer. You are the memory they cannot erase. You are the feeling they cannot put into words. And here is something even deeper. Sometimes they feel like they are losing their peace over you because you represent a turning point. You were never just another person in their life. You became a major change. Before meeting you, they were one version of themselves. After meeting you, they became someone completely different. Even if they pretend that nothing changed, something inside them certainly did. They may have met you during a fragile season, a lonely chapter, or a period of transition, and you became the unexpected presence that brought light into their darkness. Or perhaps you entered their life when everything appeared stable, and you introduced a kind of honest chaos that exposed the emptiness hidden beneath everything around them. Either way, you awakened something deep inside them, and once something within is awakened, it does not become quiet immediately. It keeps moving, it keeps reflecting, it keeps reminding. The soul does not forget what has transformed it. Snorts. So do not be surprised when they begin searching for you in other people and find only emptiness. Do not be surprised when comparisons naturally begin. Do not be surprised when they say they are over you, yet still cannot recreate the feeling you left behind, because the soul does not respond to replacements the way the ego does. The ego can accept substitutes. The soul immediately knows the difference. The ego says, "This is close enough." The soul says, "This is not the same." The ego can be distracted. The soul cannot be easily fooled once it has experienced a certain depth. Everything shallow becomes easier to recognize. Empty conversations feel colder. Superficial affection feels weaker. Easy attachments begin to feel uncertain. That is both the burden and the gift of making a real impact. You awaken standards they never realized existed within them. You awaken a longing that cannot easily be satisfied somewhere else. You awaken memories that do not follow the passage of time. And maybe that is why they feel so overwhelmed by you. Not because you chased them, not because you begged for their attention, not because you made yourself smaller, but because you were genuine, because you brought real presence into a world built on appearances, because you offered something that could not be imitated, because you touched a part of them that had been ignored for a very long time. A genuine connection carries its own gravity. It pulls, it shapes, it unsettles. It leaves a lasting imprint that ordinary encounters cannot erase. Even when the chapter has ended, the emotional energy continues to remain alive. It remains in the mind like an unfinished sentence, and unfinished sentences have a way of haunting people. Let me be clear. The mind becomes unsettled when it is forced to face a truth that the ego refuses to accept. And in these moments, that truth is often this: they cared more than they admitted. They felt more than they were prepared to acknowledge. They lost more than they were able to understand. They were changed by you. And because change is uncomfortable, they tried to control those feelings. But emotions that are never fully processed return as obsession, longing, regret, fantasy, memories, dreams, and unexpected emotional waves. They may be standing in a room full of people and still find themselves thinking about you. They may smile with someone else while still feeling your absence like an old wound opening again. They may tell themselves a different story, but their body still remembers the old one. The nervous system remembers. The heart remembers. The shadow remembers. This is why, after a connection ends, people sometimes behave in ways that seem irrational from the outside. They send mixed signals. They move closer and then pull away. They appear, then disappear once again. They reach out and then step back. They say one thing but behave in a completely different way. They test reactions. They watch for responses. They search for small signs to know whether they still have an effect on you, because deep inside, they already feel that they do. And the mind naturally resists anything it cannot completely control or fully explain. This is where pride begins to take over. Pride says, "I cannot let them see how deeply I have been affected." Pride demands the appearance of emotional distance. It pushes a person to seem unaffected, to create confusion, to leave the other person wondering. Yet, beneath that pride, the unconscious reveals a very different truth. The unconscious shows that nothing has remained untouched. The impact is still there, deep, lasting, and real. It may be called attachment, projection, desire, heartbreak, recognition, unfinished longing, spiritual tension, or emotional debt. Whatever name is given, the experience remains the same. There is no real inner peace in such a state. Instead, there is circling, returning, and remembering. The simple ability to forget is no longer available. And perhaps, from your side of this experience, you have wondered whether your presence truly mattered. The answer is clear. Yes, it did. When someone cannot dismiss you, cannot fully understand you, cannot replace you, and cannot explain why they feel the way they do, then your presence has reached a much deeper level of their psyche. You have moved beyond an ordinary interaction and become part of the structure of their inner world. That is not something small, not something temporary, and not something that can be easily erased. Some people pass through our lives like changing weather, brief and quickly forgotten. Others arrive like thunder. They interrupt old patterns. They reshape emotional landscapes. They leave people awake at night staring at the ceiling, trapped inside thoughts they could not settle during the day. Questions begin repeating in the mind. Why am I still thinking about them? Why does their presence remain in my energy? Why can I not let this go? Why does everything seem to remind me of them? These are not questions that come from a peaceful and settled mind. They come from a mind that has been touched in a deeper, less conscious place. In Jungian terms, this can be described as the place where the shadow meets the longing self. It is the inner space where suppressed emotions quietly gather, where unspoken truths settle when they have nowhere else to exist. When someone becomes psychologically significant to this degree, the shadow begins expressing itself in many different ways: irritation, fascination, jealousy, dreams, sudden nostalgia, difficulty letting go, and the desire to follow their life, their choices, and whether they have truly moved on. The conscious mind may try to describe these reactions as casual or meaningless, but the unconscious does not work that way. It treats them as important signals. Unspoken confessions of attachment, clears throat meaning, and unresolved emotional presence. Every effort to appear indifferent may secretly be an effort to remain connected. Every act of denial may, at a deeper level, become an unspoken confession. This is why silence can feel so overwhelming. Silence does not always mean emptiness. Sometimes it is simply the place where longing has no words to express itself. So, when you notice someone becoming distant, unusual, curious, emotional, impulsive, or unsettled, do not immediately dismiss it as drama. Human beings are not mechanical systems. The human soul is vast, complex, and often irrational when touched by love or pain. They may not have the courage to speak your name, but your presence remains active within them. They may never admit that they miss you, yet the feeling of missing you continues. They may not understand why you matter so deeply, but the emotional impact still remains. This is how the psyche works. It does not ask for permission before being affected, it simply becomes affected. And once it has been affected, it begins searching for integration. It tries to understand what happened. It attempts to bring together the divided parts within. It works to heal the wound that your absence revealed. But there is an even deeper lesson here for you and for everyone listening. A person becoming emotionally overwhelmed because of you is not always a sign that you must return to them. Sometimes it is a sign that they must return to themselves. Sometimes your role was never meant to last forever, but to awaken something that had been sleeping inside them. Sometimes suffering is not a punishment, but a revelation. Sometimes obsession is the ego's final resistance before accepting the truth. And sometimes the lesson is not about possession at all. It is about transformation. Because a real connection does not only create desire for another person, it forces self-confrontation. It reveals hidden wounds. It exposes where we feel empty, where we are afraid, where we depend too much on others, where we remain divided, and where we have mistaken love for need and desire for destiny. A person who seems overwhelmed by their feelings for you may actually be standing at the edge of their own psychological transformation. And you, as the one being remembered, must never allow the experience of being missed to fill the ego with pride or arrogance. There is a difference between being deeply felt and being idealized. There is a difference between being remembered and being projected onto. And there is a difference between a genuine connection and psychological projection. Carl Jung would remind us that projection is powerful because it flatters the ego, but it is not the truth. When someone seems consumed by thoughts of you, part of that experience may truly belong to you, snorts, but a large part belongs to their own inner world. That is why staying grounded is so important. You may feel honored, but remain centered. You should never become arrogant simply because someone cannot forget you. Instead, become wiser, understanding that your presence may have touched something deeply real inside them. Snorts. That realization is a responsibility, not a reason to feel superior. A mature mind does not celebrate another person's confusion. It tries to understand it. It recognizes the emotional pain hidden beneath it. It understands that the heart often travels into places where the mind cannot easily follow. And when the heart becomes overwhelmed, the mind struggles to catch up. That inner conflict can often appear from the outside like obsession, but from the inside, it feels like being pulled by invisible forces. It feels like a memory that still carries a heartbeat. It feels as though your name has been written across the walls of the psyche. It feels like waking up with a heaviness that cannot be explained. It feels like being unable to fully move forward because something inside remains connected to you. That connection may stretch, it may become strained, it may even grow weaker with time. But if the bond was deep enough, it does not simply disappear because logic decides it should. The greatest illusion is believing that the conscious mind is completely in control. It is not. The conscious mind is more like a storyteller creating explanations after deeper forces have already acted. That is why a person can insist they are finished and later discover they are emotionally undone. That is why someone can claim indifference and then suddenly feel powerful emotions again. That is why a person may speak about freedom while still feeling tied down inside. The unconscious is where the real movement takes place, and when something occupies that space, it is not easily removed. This is also why some people do not leave your life in a clean and final way. They remain like an echo. They stay like an old ache. They continue as an unanswered question. They return in dreams that feel even more vivid than reality itself. They remain as recurring figures within the mind's inner world. And perhaps that is exactly what is happening now. Perhaps they are not simply thinking about you once or twice. Perhaps the thought of you keeps interrupting them again and again. It may arrive like a wave that suddenly breaks through their concentration. No matter what they are doing, whether working, talking, or even laughing, your memory appears without warning. A song may remind them of you. A familiar place may reopen old memories. A scent, an image, or a snort's passing moment may instantly bring you back into their awareness. This is how attachment becomes registered within the psyche. It does not always appear in dramatic ways. Sometimes it reveals itself through quiet, repeated interruptions until it can no longer be ignored. And the more it is resisted, the more persistent it often becomes. So yes, they may be mentally preoccupied with you, not because you are only an imagined fantasy, but because you became an emotional reality snorts that their inner world has not fully understood or processed. You were experienced at a depth that simple forgetting cannot erase. Once that happens, the mind begins an inner journey through memory, denial, curiosity, regret, hope, and longing. It returns to the same emotional place again and again, searching for the moment when it can finally accept that something meaningful truly happened. Sometimes it already knows the truth, that it meant something important. At other times, it resists accepting that truth because of fear, hesitation, or uncertainty. And if you are the one who stepped away, it is important to understand this. Silence can strengthen the voice of the unconscious. Absence can become a mirror. Distance can turn into a form of emotional testing. Not everyone who misses you is meant to remain close to you. Not everyone who becomes emotionally fixated has the capacity to carry what they truly feel. Some people only recognize value after distance forces them to face what they once ignored. That realization can be painful, but it can also bring clarity. It reveals who was genuinely present, who was only pretending, who failed to recognize the depth of the moment, and who was aware enough to be permanently changed by it. Those who seem unable to control their thoughts about you are often the ones who encountered something emotionally rare, but were not prepared to fully understand or contain it. Ladies and gentlemen, there are connections that do not end simply because people go their separate ways. They continue in memory, in emotion, and within the invisible architecture of the soul. And when they continue there, they become powerful, not always healthy, not always simple, not always balanced, but undeniably powerful. They shape decisions, they shape behavior, they shape identity, they shape the way someone understands love, loss, and even themselves. That is why your impact matters. That is why your presence is not disposable. That is why your influence cannot be erased by one decision or a casual goodbye. If they are losing their peace over you, it is because you have become more than just a person in their story. You have become a turning point. And the final truth is this: People do not lose themselves over what is insignificant. They lose themselves over what touched them at their most vulnerable place, over what awakened something they had buried, over what made them feel alive, seen, afraid, and deeply longing all at once. That is what you may represent to them: a mirror, a wound, a memory, a doorway, a warning, a blessing, a haunting, a lesson. Sometimes all of these at once, but never nothing. Snorts, never nothing. So stand firmly in your truth. Do not shrink because someone is finally feeling the depth of what they once overlooked. Do not make yourself smaller because their inner world has become filled with your name. Let them wrestle with the meaning of your presence. Let them face the echo you left behind. Let them sit with the reality that some people do not disappear simply because the story changes. Some people become permanent within the psyche. Some people continue living in dreams, in longing, in regret, in insight, and in the slow, sometimes painful process of becoming conscious. And when that happens, the mind cannot remain completely calm. It trembles, it remembers, it reaches, it obsesses, it returns. That is the mystery of the human heart. That is the depth of the unconscious. That is why they feel as though they are losing their mind over your presence.